On today's show, a summer league breakdown from the Hawks getting a win. Yes, a win in Las Vegas. We'll have thoughts on Tyrese Martin, Sharife Cooper, stuff from Nick Van Exel, and then also some big picture NBA stuff along the way as well. Stay tuned. All that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1280 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you from Las Vegas on a Tuesday evening into Wednesday. And thank you for joining us, as always, on the podcast, making us your first listen each and every day. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, as well as YouTube on the video side. And I am, of course, on site covering Summer League. If you missed it already, I've covered the first two games in podcast form, one over the weekend. And then last night on Monday, I talked to Robbie Cowland of UPROXX and Dime right here in this very room, and sort of a crossover episode. Robbie was kind enough to join me in person. Today's podcast will be about the Hawks getting their first win in Las Vegas. That's nice to actually have, just for morale's sake for everybody involved. A 95-88 victory over the Miami Heat. Plenty to get to from that contest in this spot, and we'll sort of dive in as we always do on the show. But please subscribe to the show. Check out the most recent podcast as well as the entire slate of offerings. We've been very busy since about the middle of June, talking about the draft, of course, and then free agency, trade reactions, etc. It's all been on the same podcast feed. Okay. With that out of the way, AJ Griffin probably still the lead story, despite the fact that he did not play once again in the third game for the Hawks. I speculated last night on the show that I would guess he would not play in this spot if I had to. That ended up being the case because there was no practice in between. I have a feeling the Hawks would like to see him on the floor in a practice setting before he's actually able to play in a game. No further update, though, other than he was just ruled out. He's still day-to-day, according to the Hawks officially. And also Nick Van Exel, he's Summer League head coach. I asked him after the game about if there's anything new on Griffin, and he basically said, no, it's the same thing. He's day-to-day with the foot discomfort. So big picture, obviously not great, but as I said last night on the show, I'm not panicked about this just yet, and they have every reason to be very, very cautious. Summer League can be a little bit of a teasing kind of thing, so no reason to push him if there is any, and I mean any, concern whatsoever with AJ Griffin. As for the game itself, and everybody else was available that played in this game, and the Hawks did play much better. They made a bunch of shots. I'm going to play some audio for you later on in the podcast from Nick Van Exel. But basically, I asked him what was the big key to this one that was different. He's basically like, we made shots, and that is the case for the game. The Hawks shot 54% from the floor. They were 8 of 18 from three, a 62% true shooting mark to kind of lay that baseline out there for you. And it was mostly guys who are relevant, honestly. Tyrese Martin had a big game. Shaunie Brown had a big game as well. Sharif Cooper was better in this game, which we'll come back to later on. But other than Clemons, who obviously is honestly a pretty proven scorer as a small guard, even at the NBA level, it was a lot of guys you might recognize that were productive in this one. The starters changed for the Hawks in this game. It was Sharife Cooper, Tyrese Martin. Those guys are the same as well as Shaunie Brown, but they actually went to Joel Ayayi at the 3, basically, and then Justin Tillman in place of Alpha Kaba. I like that decision. I think Tillman's just a better player than Kaba, for instance. And actually, they did not play Marcus Georges-Hunt at all in this one. In fact, the Hawks did not play Georges-Hunt or Grant Golden, and they had been playing. So it was actually a 10-man rotation in this one, a little bit slimmer on that than it has been in the first two games. As for some first half takeaways here, they went even smaller, honestly, with that rotation in terms of that starting lineup. Tillman is a center, really, in sort of practical terms, but definitely a power forward size center. And then Ayayi is just a wing size guy, really, even like a 2-guard size guy at the 3. But that ended up working out very, very well for them. They play with good pace in this spot. I thought it's also better to have Tillman play with Cooper, because that opens up things for Cooper, I would say, overall, because Tillman, they got some chemistry. They actually played together extensively in College Park last year. So good to see those guys having some time together on the floor. There was a nice pick and roll bucket at the end with a Tillman basket in the first few minutes of this contest. In fact, after the nightmare that was the first two games from a shooting perspective, Shaunie Brown made a 3 on the first possession for the Hawks, which I'm sure felt good, because approximately they were like 2 for 100 in the first two games from 3. Actually, no, it was like 9 of 50 something, but it was really, really ugly stuff. And Shaunie shot the ball very well in this one. The Hawks went out to a 22-8 lead after basically trailing almost the entire way in the first two games. So just kind of a different flow to this one. There was a nice finish, a 3-point play from Cooper in transition. That was nice to see for him. After a slow start, he had 5 assists in the first 6 minutes of the game. Good, much better pacing from him in this spot. The Hawks were really playing fast, which I think was probably good for them given their size. I'll say this just once, probably once I forget to say this again. I will say there was a large downgrade in competition for the Hawks in this one, which partly leads to the Hawks playing better. Of course, they did a lot of stuff on their own as well. But if you look at the talent disparity between the Summer League Pelicans roster from Monday and the Summer League Heat roster from Tuesday, I have to be objective and tell you that it was a lot worse competition in this spot. There were no Trey Murphys in this one. There were no Najee Marshalls in this one. It was a lot of G League level guys. So obviously not a huge thing there, but worth noting to adjust just a little bit there that the Hawks were not playing quite as many guys that are on the top level of Summer League competition in this one, which probably helped things overall. But the Hawks were 9-11 from the floor in the early going. They made a couple threes. They shot almost 70% from the floor in the first quarter. And then Clemons was the only real change to the rotation. He actually did not play at all on Monday. Ended up giving him actually a huge lift. I think he was tied for the team lead in minutes with 25. He had 15 points off the bench. He is not really a prospect at this point in time. Chris Clemons, I think, is 28 years old. I'm looking this up as I record this, but yeah, he is. No, actually, I'm wrong about this. He's 24 years old. So my apologies, Chris Clemons. He's been around for a while. The thing with Clemons is that he's a small guard, like a very, very small scoring guard. But he's been in the NBA before, and you can kind of see that he also is their best shooter on the roster, and at least without Griffin available, he's kind of their best shooter by a pretty clear margin. So that was nice to see him out there, kind of give him some space. He can really shoot the basketball, no question about that. In the second quarter, the Hawks opened an 11-2 run with the second unit, mostly on jumpers from Clemons and Tyson Etienne. Made a few shots. The Hawks led by 19 points actually in the second quarter. There were some finishing challenges for Sharif Cooper in the second stint that he came in when he came back in, got a shot blocked, I think, twice in a row against good length. And really from that point forward, the middle portion of the game was not overly kind to the Hawks. The lead went from 19 down to 5 at the half. And then in the second half, it was actually erased entirely. And Miami came back to take the lead in this spot, which is kind of crazy when you factor in how the game actually went. The Hawks were still leading for, I don't know, probably 38 of the 40 minutes in this one, but it was kind of a dip in the middle along and then sort of an uptick later on from there, which the Tyrese Martin show took over in the third quarter, which was nice to see by all accounts. But we'll get into all that second half stuff, as well as some broad takeaways on the individual players in this game. And at the end of the show, some NBA wide stuff, as well as some audio from Nick Van Exel and Tyrese Martin. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Rock Auto, and there are so many makes and models in our world these days that actually make it really confusing, honestly. But if you go to a dealership or a local chain store, all you want to do is sell you whatever they want to sell you. Relative is actually the best option for you or your wallet. Instead of dealing with all that, if you're not an expert, and I'm not an expert in the auto space by any means, you have access to rockauto.com at home in your pocket. It's a much better option all the way across the board. Why spend more for the exact same parts from a chain store or dealership when you can order them at rockauto.com? And it's very convenient to do so. It's also a family business, been serving customers for more than 20 years at this point, and Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for each and every customer. They have all the stuff that you want or need for your car or your truck. That includes things like tail lamps and brake parts, motor oil, carpet, accessories, and more. And check it out all online at rockauto.com today. See all the parts available for your car or your truck. When you get there, do us a favor and write Locked On in the box that asks you how you heard about rockauto.com, so they know that we sent you to them. Amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, so after the halftime break, the Hawks, as I mentioned before, had their lead completely gone. Miami took the lead briefly. There was a beautiful possession by the Hawks shortly after that, which I think even Tyrese Martin shared on Twitter. I know the Hawks tweeted it out as well. What I would say was pretty obviously their best offensive possession of Summer League through 3 games. Even I think he made this win the national rounds as well. But a bunch of crisp passing on the perimeter. Ball movement was really good there. And then a setup from Cooper, a nice sort of attack there, dropped it off to Tillman, who was fouled and won 3-point play. And that was one of those old school mid 2010s Hawks kind of ball movement plays that everybody likes to see. And then really it was the Tyrese Martin show in the third quarter. He had a sequence in the third where he had a 3, then on the next possession, a 3-point play, and then another 3. So he had 9 points in 3 possessions. And then he actually ended up with about 11 points in 2.5 minutes of clock time in this one. And that basically took the lead from Hawks up by 1 back up to 12 or 13 with a little help from a layup from somebody else in that run as well. But it really was an impressive little sequence for Martin, who played with a lot of confidence in this one. I know Van Exel talked about that a lot, which we'll get back to later on. But he was really aggressive. Good to see that from him. As far as crunch time was concerned, the Hawks were up the entire way fairly comfortably, I will say. But they were up like 9 with 3.5 minutes to go. They went empty a few times. Then the Heat actually missed a layup that they probably could have made to make things interesting with like, I don't know, 2 minutes to go or so. Martin then scored kind of a dagger bucket, and they gave a too small gesture, putting his hand down, which is always a crowd pleaser. There was a 4-point play by the Heat in the final minute, which was not great execution-wise, but they held him off, and that was the end of that. Obviously, with regular season games, I will do more of a deep dive. For a new listener to the podcast, what we do during the actual season is go through everything that transpired with my analysis, quarter by quarter stuff, etc. But in Summer League, not necessarily going to be doing that, but we'll focus now on some player takeaways. Quickly on the guys who are not really sort of roster relevant. I thought basically everyone played better on this day across the board. You know, I guess Akinjo was a little bit shaky on the ball, had 3 turnovers, but I thought his defense was pretty good as usual. Hutchinson was pretty good off the bench for the Hawks. Tyson Etienne made a couple shots. Alpha Cabo was okay, kind of a small role. And I will just say this: I don't mean to be meaning to Alpha Cabo, but I think it's probably over for him. People were asking me today, like, what was going on with his rights in the Hawks. I think they have his rights, but I don't think that Alpha will be coming over and being on the Hawks roster. If I had to guess at any point, he's 26 now, and obviously it was usurped even today in the lineup by Tillman, etc. Elsewhere, the starting 5, all pretty relevant guys for me. I should mention this, that Chris Clemons, again, I said this earlier, but he was awesome in this game. 15 points, 6 rebounds. And by the way, 6 rebounds for a guy who's like 5'10-ish, maybe, if that. In 25 minutes, he was 4 of 8 from the floor, 2 of 4 from 3, and 5 of 5 at the free throw line. But the 5 starters were all guys that either I like or that are at least roster relevant for the Hawks. Ayayi is a guy who's not on a contract for the Hawks right now, but I've always liked him, as I talked about before, Summer League. 9 points, 8 rebounds for Ayayi, and also assist and a steal. He just does all the little things very, very well, defends well, did foul a bunch in this game, but still I thought played particularly solidly on the wing. Tillman was a little bit shaky with his finishing. Also had 8 fouls. Yes, you're allowed to have 8 fouls in Summer League. 10 is the foul out point in Summer League, which he kind of actually at least marginally approached in this one. But I thought Tillman at least gave him some decent minutes. Finishing wise, not his best effort, but I think his touch is still a strength of his, just some size limitations. And defensively, he had some mishaps along the way as well. But I thought he was okay for the most part. Shaunie Brown shot the ball much better today. He had kind of an outlier bad shooting game on Monday. It's probably an outlier good shooting game on this night, but it's 18 points on 11 shots. That's a good ratio. 5 rebounds and a steal. Played more power forward in this game. He actually started at the 4, basically. I know I mentioned earlier, and actually he even said he's been playing the 2 and 3, and that's sort of his primary look. But I think that even dating back to last year, him at the 4 is pretty interesting in a lot of ways, given his speed at that position. I thought he played well for the most part in this game. Sharif Cooper, I thought, was miles better in this one. 4 points, that had 9 assists, a steal, and actually he was credited with 2 blocks, which is kind of funny for a guy of Sharif's stature. 3 turnovers, which is not great, but it's not bad either. He was not fantastic, and I think if Sharif had done this exact thing in game 1 or game 2, would have been kind of an anonymous kind of performance, but he was much better. The first 2 games, he was really, really struggling to the point where it was a little bit worrisome, to be honest. He played with much better pace in this game. As a scorer, there wasn't too much juice there, and I think it's notable that Memphis has been saying this as well. They've been switching. The opponents have been switching a lot against the Hawks, and Sharif is more of that like old school pick and roll operator, not necessarily the best switch beater in the world. But I think that he found a little bit more comfort in this game, and the passing was much better. He was much more crisp and much more aggressive, not quite as much passive as he was on Monday, which was nice to see. Still has room to grow. In fact, I think he was probably better at times last year still in Summer League than he was today, but it was by far his best game of the 3. And then Tyrese Martin, again, played extremely well. 21 points on 14 shots for Martin, 2 of 5 from 3, which is good to see from him. 7 of 9 on 2s, 6 rebounds, no steals, no assists, no blocks. And it's worth noting that Martin, as a college player, was always a low assist guy. He's not a great passer by any means for a wing. That's probably his biggest weakness as an offensive player, unless the shot is kind of a weak as well. If you missed any of this from the draft stuff, Martin was kind of a shaky to non-shooter the first 3 years of college, and then kind of had a breakout last year. The Hawks are not quite sure what to make of his shooting at this point in time, but he's at least willing to get him up. He's aggressive. But rebounding wise, he's been pretty good there already in Summer League, and that's the strength of his going back to college. Defensively, he's been a little bit lost. I know Glenn Willis mentioned this on ATL 29 this week, but Martin has some rookie stuff going on defensively, which is not a problem. I think his tools are just fine there. Actually, that's probably one of his intriguing points eventually. But rookies always struggle defensively in certain times, and that's been the case. But I thought he was awesome in this one, especially in the third quarter. I think he had 13 points in the third alone, and really getting to the rim. That's something the Hawks do not have a lot of on this roster. Obviously, more now with DeJounte Murray, but in previous years, it's really just been Trey as their primary get downhill guy. I'm not saying Martin's going to play a big role on the team this year because he probably isn't, but I think that long term, the hope would be for Martin, who is, by the way, still unsigned and could be on a two-way, could be on a full contract. We'll see. But I think that that's one of his strengths right now is he's willing and able to attack the rim in a way that's pretty encouraging. And I think the Hawks do like him for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, that's kind of all I have on the game itself today. The Hawks are guaranteed to play 2 more times in Las Vegas. The next one is Thursday. It's actually an afternoon game. It's the first game of the day in Vegas. It's a 1 p.m. local time tip-off, so a 4 p.m. Eastern time game on Thursday against San Antonio. It'll be on ESPN2, so if you're a sicko looking to watch that on a Thursday afternoon, either post-work or during work, perhaps, if you're still there, that's the next one on the agenda. And then the Hawks will play either Friday or Saturday. Not entirely sure which one just yet because the NBA has to announce that. It will not do that until after the games end, probably Wednesday at least, if not Thursday. So keep that in mind. I'll sort of fill you in as that goes. I'm not planning to do another show in between games. If there's something that will necessitate it, if there's a trade or something like that, I will definitely break in and do that. But as far as the plan is concerned, I'll podcast after that game on Thursday and get it going from there. Okay, before we get to some more stuff, including some audio from Nick Van Exel and Tyrese Martin from today's game, a word from our sponsors on the show. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline, and NBA Madness continues right now with Summer League still in full swing out here in Las Vegas. I am living proof of that. And the draft is, of course, in the past, but all eyes are on the future. Still with Summer League, free agency still kind of open at this point. And with that in mind, BetOnline is the place to fire away on the futures market, and the BetOnline is also the number one source for all the betting needs that you have in sports information, both in the near future and always. Find all the latest odds, news, and developments across the sports world, including Summer League odds, major events, MLB odds and scores, the latest fight stuff, and futures on the NBA, NFL, college football, and college basketball, and as well as hockey, Stanley Cup stuff, etc. BetOnline is your continuous source for all the other wagering averages that you'd like as well, and that includes live betting and esports, poker, casino games, and more. And beyond that, there are other sports available at BetOnline right now, like the big ones like soccer and hockey, golf, tennis, also auto racing, horse racing, etc. They even have rugby, lacrosse, table tennis, cricket, entertainment bets, and all the sports that you possibly want. It's all in one place at BetOnline. Head there right now today on your computer mobile device to learn more about all the trends and the action in the sports world. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, and before some audio from Van Exel and Tyrese Martin, some new NBA actually announcements from Tuesday. So in addition to Adam Silver doing a press conference, which doesn't have a ton of like Hawks related news involved, there was actually an announcement from the league on some rule stuff, which is actually interesting. First, they sort of a no-brainer thing, but they adopted the play-in tournament on a full-time basis. That is not a surprise at all. That was why we expected it to be happening after this first 2 years. It was never going to be actually going away. I like the play-in in general. It's not like 100% universally loved, but I like that. I think it's been good for competition. It's good. It's sort of good, exciting basketball that matters from teams that are not great necessarily. If you're in the play-in, you're not a great basketball team. I think, last year's Hawks were not great necessarily. They were still in the play-in and made their way out of it. But I do like the play-in as far as a competitive balance kind of thing, and also gives some incentive to teams to kind of try to win late in the season. The Board of Governors also approved a change that's pretty interesting for gameplay, and that's trying to eliminate take fouls. So basically, they're trying to legislate away the part of the game where players are intentionally hacking to stop fast breaks. The Hawks have been very aggressive in doing this, especially Gallinari's was kind of their poster boy for this. But the Euro foul is kind of what it's called as well, where you grab a guy to avoid a fast break defensively. It's probably good strategy. At least it used to be good strategy, and I will say that always. But it's also kind of bad for the product because fast breaks are interesting and exciting, and fans like them. So I think that's why the league's doing this, to kind of give you more opportunities to see guys in transition. The penalty is going to be one free throw, which anyone on the floor can take for the offense. And then also the offense keeps the ball. So it's not like you can just foul a bad free throw shooter. It's actually, they get to choose the free throw shooter, like a technical foul, basically. And then the offense keeps the ball. So we'll see if that works. I think it definitely will. I'm sure guys will forget along the way that that's probably going to be necessary, but alas, that's where we are at this point in time. Also, Shams Charania reported they discussed the idea. I want to say discuss one more time, discuss the idea of an in-season tournament for all 30 teams. And then the top 8 would enter a single elimination tournament, including a Final Four style event at a neutral site at the end of that. That is not officially happening. So the other things are actually announced. This was not officially happening, nor was it voted on. It was just discussed at the Board of Governors meeting on Tuesday. I am not the biggest fan, honestly, of this, and it will not happen until at least next year. It might be better with real stakes. I'm not really sure how they would do that, but I think the mid-season tournament's it's kind of a soccer style thing. Not really my bag necessarily, but maybe if they can find a way to incentivize players, it will be useful. But for now, we'll handle that in the future, but it has to be collectively bargained because they'll probably add games to the schedule, which I'm sure players don't necessarily want to do. Lots of give and take and like what's the reward going to be? Because if the teams don't have a proper incentive to go out and play their best guys and try to win that thing, it can kind of go the wrong way in a hurry. So we'll see how that all goes at this point. Okay, last thing. I'm going to give, I'm just going to basically play some audio for you. It's not the greatest audio because Summer League's kind of a whirlwind at the end of games in a lot of ways. So no video, and it's going to be audio only if you're watching on the video side. But first up is Nick Van Exel. I'm just going to play you his entire post-game interview from Tuesday's game for some color. You hear him talk about Cooper, hear him talk about the way they played overall, a brief update on AJ Griffin, etc. And here's Nick Van Exel, mostly with questions from me after the game on Tuesday. So what was different today that you liked? Obviously, besides the result itself, what was better today?
I made shots.
Yeah,
made some shots, man. Shot 53%. First two games we were low 30s. I mean, when you make shots, you give yourself a chance. But with that being said, I thought, what we talked about this morning was playing with a pace, getting downhill, and making an extra pass. And I thought those guys did a great job with that. And also the 2-point guards did a great job with the tempo of the game. Like they weren't in too much in a hurry for most part of the game. They really controlled the tempo and made some really good passes.
I was going to ask about Sharif. Obviously, a couple of struggle games. He was better today. What did you see from him? Assists and all, just kind of running the offense.
For me, it was just his pace. Watching film with him and letting him trying to help him understand. When you go into the paint against these big trees, it's hard to finish. So he has to slow himself down so he can see the whole floor. I thought he did that pretty good, and he made some good passes.
Tyrese had a big game, especially second half. What did you see from him just in attack mode?
Tyrese he's showing some stuff. I like to joke a little bit to keep the bunch loose, and I drew up a play for him, and he wanted it in the post. I said, "You ain't got no post game." He's like, "Yeah, give it to me down there." And I gave it to him, and he made a really, really good move. He missed the shot, but he's showing, people what he can do.
Is there any update on AJ beyond just the day-to-day stuff? Same thing as it's been?
I just know day-to-day. I know as much as you do. I know he's trying, so it's day-to-day.
With the day off tomorrow, what's sort of the mindset for the rest of the way, knowing you got 2 more to play?
Just keep improving. It's these guys' career. So if they can take something from this summer league that we've given them, and when they go to that next place, they hear it registers a little bit quicker. That's what it's about, transferring that information, and hopefully, they keep it in their system and they grow from it.
All right, and last thing, some audio from Tyrese Martin from Tuesday after the game. You will hear some questions from Annie Finberg of Hawks.com. Annie, shouts to Annie if you're listening to this podcast. But I just kind of let her cook on this one, interviewing Tyrese. Actually, the video is available on Hawks social as well. But here's Tyrese Martin after his big game on Tuesday afternoon/evening.
All right, Tyrese, you got that win under your belt. What felt different about today versus the other games?
Just our pace, just our energy on the defensive end. We were very communicating on defensive end, and it translated to offense. And I feel like that was the biggest difference rather than the other 2 games we played.
Game high, 21 points for you. What was working so well for you on the offensive side?
I think the game just slowed down. This is a different level for me. Coming from college, the game is definitely faster. So I feel like after getting a couple under my belt, definitely slowed down. I was able to just get downhill and play with them myself. I felt like myself again.
Coach Van Exel joked that you were trying to show off all of your moves, especially even in the post. How important has it been for you to show off how well-rounded your game is?
I just want, wherever I feel like I'm effective and help us win, that's where I feel like I'm going to excel at. And the coach joked with me, asked me if I could go down on the post, and I told him, yeah, I didn't get the bucket, but I feel like I got to get shot off.
And a couple more games here at Summer League. How do you guys carry this momentum and close it out strong?
This is a big win, so we just gotta go back, watch film, see what we messed up. We almost could have get that game away at the end, so we gotta make sure we finish quarters better, and just make sure we carry this momentum over to the next game.
Thank you.
Yes,
All right, and that's it for today's show. Please subscribe to the podcast. I'll be back again one more time after the game on Thursday from Las Vegas, and then we'll get into the schedule from there. Offseason is approaching. I'm kind of already there, obviously, but the true offseason starts when Summer League is over. But we'll have content. If you're not familiar with this, we do not go away when the season ends. We're going to be here multiple times a week, every week between now and training camp, and then ramp back up at that point in time. So please subscribe, rate, and review. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me on Twitter at BT Rowland if you would like to do that. And we'll see you all later in the week.